Hey, hello everyone. Happy Friday. My name is Michelle James, and I'm the Senior Director of Alumni Engagement here at the Rollins School of Public Health at Emory University. Today, we are hosting a webinar, Effective Interviewing, Essential Tips for Job Seekers. So whether you're looking for employment due to the recent federal cuts, considering a transition to the private sector, or maybe a new role within your current organization, today's webinar hopefully will help you prepare for the interview and stand out from your competition. Our speaker today is Dr. Astha Purohit, a 2011 Rollins graduate of the Department of Health Policy and Management and current member of our Rollins Alumni Board. She is a global leader with extensive experience in the fields of management, healthcare, philanthropy, public health, AI, and a former McKinsey consultant. She's held previous roles with CVS Health, DoorDash, and advising senior suite leaders on driving innovation and growth to delivering amazing customer experiences across the private sector. She is currently the director of Walmart, spearheading AI and ML model development and deployment across the product ecosystem. Astha, I'm going to turn it over to you to let you share some practical techniques to help our participants impress potential private sector employers in their next interview and give you the floor.
Yeah, thank you so much, Michelle. Looking forward to this conversation and excited to be here with you guys and talking about all things interviewing 101, what to do, what not to do, how to set yourself up for your best shot at success, right? So we're going to go through a couple of different topics, but which you sort of see here, right? In today's sort of Zoom, we're going to talk about everything you need to do to set yourself up to have a great interview, right? And most often, even before you step foot through the door and start the interview process, there's a lot of work or pre-work that you need to do. First is researching the company, right? Like figuring out who do you want to apply to. Once you figure out like, hey, here are the 5 or 6 companies that I want to apply to, figuring out what departments, what teams would be a good fit for you, given your prior role, your skill set. Really, when you see a job posting, doing your best to understand the role. Is there someone you know at the company who can help you understand the role better, give you an input into the culture of the company? What is the hiring manager? Like, what can you find out about the role even before you apply? Then, hypothetically, you've got the interview, you've applied, looking up your interviewers. Most of the times when you have an interview, you're told who you're going to interview with. So doing a LinkedIn search, seeing, do they post on LinkedIn? What are their interests? What can you find out about them before you interview? Tailoring your resume so that when you go into your interview, you know which stories you're going to hit so that it's naturally a good fit. Next, we're going to talk about how to answer interview questions well. And this is a framework that consultants at McKinsey use, folks at Amazon, LinkedIn, tech companies, all of them use the STAR LA framework, which we're going to deep dive into. How much practice and rehearsing of answers you should do ahead of the interview. Any technical skills that you need to brush up on, right? This could be knowing SQL or Java, or if it's a program role, how do you do program management? How do you track Jira, OPIFs, whatever it is that particular role requires in terms of technical skills. Thinking through the logistics, right? You want to arrive at the interview early. How are you going to get there? Carrying your notepad, having your outfit ready. So this whole pre-interview checklist, we're going to deep dive into portions of it and talk about it. If you have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. So let's talk about interviews, right? Let's say you put your resume in, you've gotten invited for an interview. There are 2 types. You could have an in-person interview or you could have a virtual interview. The 2 are essentially different, and there are different things you need to do to get ready for it. First, if it's a virtual interview, test your technology beforehand, right? Whether it's Teams, whether it's Zoom, whether it's something else, make sure that you have an account you can easily log in. Even if it's a virtual interview, dress professionally, wear a suit, pick a quiet location, pick a background that is very professional, right? This is not the time to have a fun, playful background. Have a notepad where you can take notes. So that's how you think about a virtual interview. In person, always plan to arrive. Like I plan to arrive half an hour early. That way, even if I run late, I'm at max 10, 15 minutes early, right? But always at least plan to be early. I've had an interview where someone showed up 20 minutes late. It was virtual, but they just were like, oh, I forgot. So always arrive early, dress professionally, bring copies of your resume, have a professional looking notepad. That's how you think about in-person versus virtual interviews. Now, jumping into the actual interview process, right? This is the first time you're meeting this person. Unless they're doing a full day of interviews, which isn't very common unless it's like a bank or consulting, typically an interview gets slotted into that person's calendar, like by the recruiter, right? They have back-to-back meetings or they have like their workday, and somewhere in the workday, they have an interview. So put yourself in the mindset of the hiring manager, right? They have a full plate. They probably have like stuff to do, a life to get to, and now they have one more thing that they need to do. When you think about it that way, you approach the first couple of minutes of an interview very differently, right? Start out by finding a very human point of connection in the first 5 to 10 minutes, because as I said, they're exhausted. They've had a full work day. Like for them to remember you, or to have a good experience with the interview, you need to have a human connection. And I'm going to give you two examples. I'm going to give you two examples that I use. It took me a good while to figure these out, but pretty much for my entire professional career, I've used them. The first one is I'm Indian. My name is Astha, and most people, when they see it, they have a hard time pronouncing it. So invariably, my icebreaker is, hi, I'm Astha. An easy way to say my name is, have you seen the movie Terminator? Most people have. They say yes. I'm like, do you remember what Arnold's most famous line is? And they're like, they generally think about it and they either come up with, I'll be back, or hasta la vista, baby. And I'm like, hasta la vista, baby. That's how you say my name, right? That is my universal icebreaker, no matter who I'm interviewing with. But in that moment, I've had a moment of human connection. I've also pulled them in, right? I've forced them to engage with me by asking them the question, have you watched the movie Terminator? Do you remember the most famous line? If nothing else, that is something that they will remember, because that is not a very typical opening. After that, invariably, you're going to have them ask you, tell me about your career. What brings you here? Some version of wanting to know your story. That's another great place for you to bring something which is a true moment of human connection. And I'll give you the second example that I invariably use. So I'm a physician who then pivoted and has joined the private sector. But in India, you don't have undergrad. So when I tell them my story, a fun fact that I always add is an interesting fact about me is I'm a physician. Like most Indian parents, my parents were really focused on education and they put me in school a year early. So I got into med school at the age of 17. You're legally allowed to drive in India at 18. So every morning, my dad would drive me over to my med school because I couldn't be on the road. The government did not trust me on the road. And then I would cut open a human body or dissect a human brain. That is my second moment of human connection with them as I tell them my story, right? They're going to remember that. Whatever else happens in the interview, in the first 5 to 10 minutes, I found two ways of engaging with them as a human being. Take a step back. When you like someone, when you've connected with them, you're more likely to go out of your way for them, right? Like it's an easy way to build a connection with the person you're interviewing with. So as you think about your interview, really think hard. How are you going to bring that human connection in the first couple of minutes? Because that is going to set up sort of that framework for your whole interview. You could also, like, if you can't think of anything, complimenting genuinely is another good option. Before I came up with these two, I had an interview where I complimented someone's nail color, and we ended up having a 5-minute conversation, right? So find a way to connect with them, be attentive, be present, like just be your happiest and most enthusiastic version, right? There are people who draw us in. I often joke about this as like Legally Blonde, right? The movie. There was something about her character that drew you in. She was warm, she was kind, she was genuine. You want to bring that energy to an interview. And there are times where the interviewer is checked out, right? I've had those interviewers. That doesn't mean that you step down on your game of warmth, attention, presence, enthusiasm, right? But think about your first 5 to 10 minutes as really, really critical and focus on these things. Now, let's talk about what to do when you get asked a question, right? You're asked a question. It could be like, tell me about a time where you failed. Tell me about a time where you had to collaborate. There's a list of common questions which are behavioral in nature, right? They're asking you to look at your past, draw on an example, and help them understand how you would do in the future. That is what a behavioral question is. It's look in your past, tell me what you did so I know when I put you in a difficult situation, how you will react. There is a standard framework that most of the private sector uses, which is called STAR. We'll go through that. But if you are really wanting to take it to the next level, there's a secret sauce, which I'm going to share with you afterwards. Let's jump into STAR. So when you think about STAR, it's basically a structured way for you to answer any question which is behavioral. Tell me about a time, right? The minute you hear some version of that, think STAR. STAR stands for describing the situation, describing what was asked of you, aka the task, describing in great detail the action you took. And here you want to be the hero of the story, right? Like you want to be the main character energy in this story, like everything that you did to fix the problem, and then the results you delivered on. So that's what STAR is. Jumping into situation, right? Like situation is basically providing context. Like, hey, I was in my prior company, we were launching a new feature, we were running behind. I had a team that I was working with who wasn't very engaged. They didn't like me, right? Basically, the gist is like, what is the context that the person needs to know so they can follow the story? You do not want to take a lot of time on this, right? And tactically, we'll talk about how to think about these, but you want to write it down. Like I typically write down my interview stories, and this is between like 2 really long lines or maybe 3 to 5 short lines. That's how much time you should spend on situation, right? Like high level, provide context. Now, task. When you think about the task, you should be able to describe the task very clearly in one line. Like, as the project leader, I was tasked with doing X, Y, Z, right? If you can bring numbers into here, it's even better. But you want to be crisp, you want to be tight, you want to be like, this is exactly what was asked of me. Next, you jump into the action, right? This is where you spend the most time. Your action is where you become the hero of the story, right? Like, think of it as you're Harry Potter, like you're the main character, and you're going to be like, here's what I did. And within action, typically focus on 3 things, right? I did A, B, C. And within A, I ran into this problem. Here's how I addressed it. With B, the action I took was this. Here was the outcome, right? Don't go into like 12 things you did. Try and consolidate it into 3 actions that you took, which are very specific, that moved the needle. This is where you spend the bulk of your time. Again, ideally, you do not want to have a monologue, right? Where you're talking for 10 minutes. You want to ask the interviewer like, hey, then this happened, and I had 2 options. Do you want to take a guess on what I did? Or here, like I was standing in an auditorium and I was giving a speech, and one of the nurses got up and said, oh, I think you're too young, you don't have enough experience. And I remember feeling this tightness in my chest and stressed out. And then I did XYZ, right? Make it real, bring a human element to this story. Like we humans have connected through story for generations. Don't speak like a robot. So that's action. And then results. This should be crisp. This should be clear. Just the way your task was one line, your results should be one line. Like, we did this, we achieved this, it led to this. Very simple, very crisp, very easy to follow. So that is the STAR framework. This is, if there's nothing else that you walk away with, right? Walk away with this. I do see there are some things in the chat. Michelle, are there any questions around this? Or if anyone has a question on this, let me know. I would rather answer it right now before we move forward.
So there's one question that came in from a gender perspective. I have heard we should be weary of complimenting interviewers and colleagues. For example, if the interviewee is a male and compliments a female, like on nail polish color, that might be viewed differently. So what are some generic examples of maybe some compliments that can be used in opposite gender interactions? Great question.
That is a great question. And I think you were going back to the first 5 to 10 minutes. Let me answer that very quickly. Yes, if you're a man, like, complimenting the opposite gender can feel weird. If someone who was a man complimented me, I don't know how I'd receive it. Like, I know they'd come in with the right intent, but it'd be hard to talk about nail polish colors with a man versus a woman, right? And the example I gave you, the person who I complimented was a woman, and she and I ended up talking about nails. A great example of complimenting someone who's of the opposite gender is if you've done your research on them on LinkedIn, and if they've posted on LinkedIn before, right? Whether they've given an interview somewhere, whether they've had a webinar, whether they posted about some topic, interviewing about that is a really good option, right? It's neutral. It shows them that you were interested. It shows them that you looked them up on LinkedIn. So that is a really good example of complimenting someone of the opposite gender. Again, I know I gave the example of nails, but that was right off the bat, she and I had that chemistry. So be really careful. Do not compliment something which could be construed in the wrong way. So that is a great question. Does that answer sort of what you were looking for? LinkedIn would be the TLDR is that. Anything else on STAR before we move forward?
I'm not seeing anything at this point, Asta.
Okay, perfect. Let's keep going. So STAR is basics, right? Like, if you're interviewing for a corporate job, start with STAR. Now if you want to go next level and really like hit your story, make your story hit home, think about it as STAR LA, right? So you had situation, task, action, results. What did you learn from it? And how do you apply it today, right? Because that shows the person that not only were you able to deal with that difficult situation, but you were someone who has a growth mindset. You were someone who's always willing and capable of learning, improving yourself, and getting better. So when you just talk about STAR, it stops there, right? Like, ideally, it's like a Harry Potter story. There was something really massive in front of you. You took a lot of action, and then you delivered the result. But what did you learn from it? How do you apply it today? That shows next level thinking. So ideally, when you practice your stories, you think about them in the STAR LA framework. And I've given you examples here of what like learning could look like, and then how do you apply it today. Now, what I will say is, very tactically, when you start doing interview prep, you should open your Excel, right? And in your Excel, you should have about 5 to 7 really meaty, good stories. Those stories should cover everything from team collaboration, should cover a time where you failed, should cover about like communication, your typical behavioral questions, right? And a story will typically hit 2 or different topics. Like, your story about failure could also be a great story for collaborating with your team. It could also be a great story to showcase communication, right? So you will, on that Excel, write out your stories, and you're going to have the STAR LA framework on the left, right? And each story, you're going to write out the situation, the task, the action, the result, the learning, and the application. And then at the bottom, and if this is interesting, I have a template of this in blank format that I use. I'm happy to send it to Michelle if if folks want. But basically in that, I write out all my stories. And then at the bottom, I check off, like, this is a story for collaboration. This is a story for failure, whatever it is. And then that one page of Excel allows you to see all of your stories and all of the possible answers that you have to any question the interviewer may ask. This is also a great time to use ChatGPT, right? If I was you, I would go to ChatGPT and basically say, hey, give me a list of the most common 50 behavioral questions. Give me a list of the most common and most difficult behavioral questions, right? They'll repeat. You'll get a good sense of the kind of stories you need. And then you take these slides, you put it in ChatGPT, and you're like, hey, this is my story, convert it into the STAR LA framework. And you'll have an answer. Obviously, you'll have to modify it. And ChatGPT, I've noticed, isn't very good about adding that human element to it, right? So bring some human elements into that. But that should make this Excel with all of your stories mapped out in the STAR LA framework across all of the behavioral questions really, really easy. And that's how I would interview prep. Typically, anytime I've interviewed for a role, I spend at least a month of intensive prep getting ready for it. It has started to take me shorter and shorter amount of time because I've done a lot of this work. Right now, if I have to interview, I just go back to my Excel and I'm like, okay, these were my stories from the last time. Here are 2 more. So I just add to it. But the first time you do it, it will take you a solid month. And I did this the first time when I was getting my MBA from MIT and applying for McKinsey. It does get easier the first time. It will take you a good time to get really crisp in how you deliver your message. How do you bring this sense of human connection in your stories? I'm going to pause there. Any questions here? Okay. Michelle, keep going.
Yep, keep going. I don't see anything right now.
Okay, perfect. Now let's talk about wrapping up an interview, right? The interview went well, your stories were strong, you come to the last 5 to 10 minutes. Invariably, they'll ask you, do you have a question for me, right? This is really, you should have a list of questions that you go in with. And I know that we all want to know the salary and the benefits, but you do not want to ask that question here. What you want to do here, and I'm going to give you examples of 2 great questions, is show genuine interest in the role, in the company, in the team, in the manager, right? One of the best questions that you can ask at this point is, hey, I'm going to assume that Michelle just interviewed me. I'd be like, hey, Michelle, I really enjoyed this interview, right? I want us to, hypothetically, let's say it's a year from now, you've hired me and I am the best hire you made, right? And you have a new role that you're opening for. You're talking to your recruiter and you're like, I need to find one more person who's exactly like Astha. What would I need to do to be that person for you in the next 1 year? Right. And automatically what that makes Michelle do is she thinks, hey, if I hired Astha, like, one, she's thinking about hiring you, right? Because it forces her, the way you phrased it, forced her to think that she hired you. Second, it's making her think about, like, you're going to be this rock star who comes in and it's the best hire she made, right? So in a way, you're planting the seed in her head. And then third, she's going to tell you exactly what you need to do to be successful, right? Like, she'll be like, Astha was ambitious. She had a strong ownership mindset. She had great communication skills. She was a rock star at collaborating. So in a lot of ways, you're making the person think of they hired you and tell you exactly what they need in this role. That's a really good question. The other question to ask them, which is in a similar vein, you can pick one or the other, is like, what do I need to do in the first 100 days to knock the ball out of the park, right? Like, what are the top 3 things I need to do? And that's really good because then when you send the thank you email, you can refer back to this. So you can pick both questions, one question, but those are examples of really thoughtful questions that you can ask. Again, reiterate your enthusiasm and end on a positive note, right? I had a really great interview. I really enjoyed talking to you. Thank you for taking the time to connect with me. That is key. Next, let's say you walked out of the interview, right? You're done with the interview really went well. What do you do after the interview? One, whether you get the job or no, it's an opportunity for us to get better, right? Better in our communication skills, better in our storytelling skills, better in like, you need reps under your belt to be confident at interviewing well. And I know that when we're looking for jobs, sometimes you're just like, I just want a job, give me a job, right? But if you view this interview process as a way to sharpen your communication skills, be more effective at telling your story, you will have more fun in the process. So one thing I always do after an interview is like, hey, what went well? What went badly? Was there a question that I really did not know how to answer that I messed up on, right? And if the answer is yes, then I go back to my Excel and I'm like, hey, this was the question. I didn't do well on this. Here's what I could have done better. So my Excel has become better, which I will use anytime I interview, right? So I can come back to it. It's almost like a document I keep referring to anytime I'm looking for a job. So always reflect on an interview, make your notes, send a thank you email like, hey, thank you for taking the time. This is a good time to be like, these were the top 3 things you said were important to you. Here's why I have it. Keep it short. No one really reads a very long email. If you've not heard back, right? Let's say it's been 2 weeks, reach out to the recruiter and be like, hey, would love to know where we are. I'm still very interested. Like, let me know if there's anything I can do to sort of provide more information. Then also, if you're called for another round, prepare for your next steps. Like figure out who are you interviewing with? Is it a case study? Is it a technical round? Like go ahead and prepare for your next steps if you get invited. Stay engaged and stay professional. An example of this is I actually had interviewed for Walmart about 2.5 years ago. I didn't get the role. I got a role at DoorDash. I went to DoorDash. But the person I interviewed with, I really liked her. And she ended up going in a different direction because she found someone who did the exact thing that she was looking for from Amazon. So she's like, I really liked you. I would have loved to hire you, but I found this perfect person who did the exact same thing. So I went with them. The thing that I did out of that was like, I made her my mentor. So I would talk to her once every 6 months. And then 2.5 years later, when I was looking for a role shift, I reached out to her and she put me in touch with someone. That's how I got my current role, right? So I wanted to share that as an example of professionalism. Like, was I bummed out when I didn't get the role? Yes. Was I unhappy? Because I was like, I know I can do the job and I know I will work so hard. Yes. But because I had stayed in touch with her over 2.5 years, that connection helped me get my current role, right? I wasn't assuming that, hey, this person is gonna, I didn't know when I stayed in touch with her that she'd help me get a job. But it's funny how if you're professional and if you maintain sort of that connection, things have a funny way of working out. That's sort of where I'm at. I did want to stop here and answer any difficult interview questions that you might have. And I have 2 examples that I'm going to go through. And then if there are any like particularly gnarly interview questions that you have, drop them in the chat and we can talk through it. I might not have the answer right out of the gate, but I can at least help with some pointers, or I'll get back to you if I don't have, like, if I can't think of anything. But I wanted to start by talking about weaknesses, right? A lot of times in an interview, you will be asked, tell me about your weakness, or tell me about an area of weakness that you have. Most people will give you some version of perfectionism, like, hey, I'm a perfectionist. I have a really hard time of letting things go. I need them to be perfect. And as someone who has interviewed a lot and who has been on the other side where I've interviewed folks as well, anytime someone gives me that answer or when I give it, I don't buy it because I'm like, and I can be a perfectionist, but I still don't buy it because that is such a textbook cliched answer. So let me give you an example of a better answer to that question. Instead of saying, hey, I'm a perfectionist, a great example is if you've ever led a team or if you've ever led, it could be an intern. It does not need to be you have a team of 15 people. It could be an intern. Something that I really struggle with is when I lead a team or when I manage people and I see them struggling, my default is to step in and take over. And one of the things that I've realized is when I do that, the person under me, it could be an intern, it could be a team of 50, they do not learn, right? I've taken away that opportunity for them to flex their skills, to grow, to develop their muscle as a leader. So one of the things that I consciously am learning and trying to do is to let my team fail. There are times where I still struggle with it and I fail, but that is something that I'm actively working on. It's something I know I need to get better at because that makes my team stronger. That is an area of weakness, right? But that is a different answer than the answer to I'm a perfectionist. So think about answering typical questions in a different way, right? Because if you Google that particular question, even on Google, the answer is perfectionism. But think about it. If you've interviewed 5 people and you've got the exact same answer, you know something funky is going on. That isn't a real answer, right? So think about the hardest questions you can get and think about what spin you want to put on them so that it isn't coming as rehearsed, it isn't coming across as something that is textbook. It's something unique to you. So I'm going to pause there. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer. But yeah.
We have one in the chat that is, I was recently asked about how I approach escalating issues to my supervisors or superiors. How would you approach that question?
Yeah. So what I would say is typically when I think about my supervisors, it's my immediate supervisors, and then it's the broader leadership team who might be my boss's boss's boss, right? So when I think about it with my boss, I typically have one-on-ones, and in that weekly meeting, I like to go in with a very clear agenda where I inform her of the status of most projects and specifically any area where I might have a roadblock or where I need her help to move forward. If there is a critical project which I had a meeting for, which I need immediate help, I might run into her in the hallway and give her a quick update. But typically, I like to use my one-on-ones to inform her. If it's the broader leadership team where I need to build consensus, I typically work with my manager to figure out what the right cadence is to communicate any updates, any roadblocks with them, right? And the reason why you'd answer it that way is if it's your hiring manager who's asking that question, you want her to feel good that you will go through her to the leadership team, right? So your one-on-ones are a way for her to know exactly what's going on. And then by telling her you work with your supervisor, aka your hiring manager, to figure out the right cadence, you're showing a level of deference, but at the same time, you're letting her know that you're on top of things. You presented to leadership multiple times before, and you can even bring an example. Like very specifically, I had a project where I did this, it completely blew up. I worked with my manager to present the 2 options to the leadership group. They made that decision, and then we moved forward, right? So it's important to sort of make sure if it's your hiring manager, you do not create a situation where they might feel insecure. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Yes.
Awesome. Where do you see yourself 5 years from now? I see another question, right? So that is a good one. In this, hypothetically, let's say your dream is you want to be sitting on a beach sipping pina coladas, right? That is not a good answer. A great answer for that is to talk about the things that this role has. Like 5 years from now, I hope I'm leading more complex problems. 5 years from now, I hope I am leading a bigger team, right? Talk about sort of the vision that you have for the role that you might want to step into. Don't ask for a promotion. Don't ask for a job title. Don't ask for those things. Talk about the other things that automatically lead to that, right? If you have a lot more scope, you likely have got a promotion. If you're managing a bigger team, you likely have got a promotion. If you're solving more complex problems, you likely got a promotion. So instead of focusing on the title or like a really fun thing you might want to do, focus on scope, the kind of problems you're solving, the teams that you're leading, how you might be collaborating at a much broader level, like focus on skill sets and expansion of those skill sets in 5 years. That answer generally is better than an answer about title, pay, all of those types of things. Okay. Anything else that I can help folks with?
We've got another one. How do you stay in touch professionally without being a pest or being intrusive? Do you use email or LinkedIn? Do you share updates about your career or just ask kind of generic check-in questions?
Yeah. I will say that I'm sharing the story. I have not implemented this story. I wish I'd implemented this story. I want to, but I don't. But this is a story about Bill Clinton when he, irrespective of how you feel politically, this is a place where I think we could learn from him, is he used to network anytime he met someone new, he was like, this is a great person. I want to stay in touch with them. He used to have those 3x5 notepads. He would write their name on it. He would write like whatever they spoke about and whatever, like something that stood out to him, and he would put that notepad. And from what I've heard, every day he would pick a notepad up and reach out to someone. And that allowed him to stay in touch with people through the years and build his network. I personally don't do that. I wish I did, because if I did that, my network would be amazing. But I think a great way that I use is if there's someone, whether I got the job or I didn't get a job, or someone who I think would be great to stay in touch with, I ask them for a 20-minute meeting once every 6 months. Like, that is such a small ask. Most people will not say no. So if it's someone who works in a different company, or I had someone who used to work at Walmart and they've left to join another company, but they're at a really high position. So it's like, hey, can we connect once every 6 months? So we just sort of talk once every 6 months. If it is someone within my organization, right, and I want them to be my mentor, I get very specific. I'm like, hey, I'd love for you to be my mentor. Could we spend 30 minutes once every month for the next 4 months, right? So I'm very clear. It's basically, I'm asking for 2 hours of your time over a span of 4 months. And then I also tell them, this is the topic I want to dig into. Like, I want to learn from you A, B, C. When I do those types of sessions, I typically send them a list of questions ahead of time. I don't expect them to read them. I don't expect them to think about them. But what that does is it signals to them, I'm really serious about getting mentorship from them. So they're much more willing to spend that 30 minutes with me. So those are the two approaches I take. If it's someone who is external, who I just want to stay in touch, like 20 minutes once every 6 months, I ask them. And these are people I know. Like, either I had an interview with them, it was someone who I worked with who's exited a company, it's someone in my old company. If it's within my company, someone who I want to mentor, I ask them for like 30 minutes for like 3 or 4 meetings spread out over 3 or 4 months. And I always send them that list of topics to show my seriousness. That's how I think about networking. Anything else?
There's another one in the chat. Maria says she looks up interviewers on LinkedIn before they meet. And if she learns a point of connection, like perhaps they both went to Rollins, is that appropriate to mention, or is that too stalker-ish?
No, it depends. So I've had an interview where we just hit it off. Like, in the first 10 minutes, like, we spent 15 minutes talking. And I told her, like, hey, I looked you up on LinkedIn. And I even used the word, like, I really looked you up on LinkedIn and I went down the rabbit hole and I'm so impressed by XYZ. I've also had someone who was very like, it was just hard to connect with this person when I was interviewing with them. But in that case, I used the same thing. I was like, I was really impressed before the interview. I looked you up and I saw that you spoke at XYZ, right? So I've said it in both ways to like both folks where I had a real strong connect versus where I didn't. But the words I used were different, right? Where I had a really strong connection, I was like, I really like went down the rabbit hole and you've done XYZ and I really resonate with that. Versus the person who was not connecting with me, it was very professional professional, like, hey, when I saw that, I just looked you up on LinkedIn and I was really impressed, right? It was like 2 lines. He didn't react to it. There's no harm. It's in how you say or deliver the message. If there's anything you need from me, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to answer questions on LinkedIn. You'll find me as Dr. Astha Purohit. So yeah.
Okay. Wow, Asta, I learned a lot. You have definitely opened my eyes, and I'm not job searching, but I think it's always fantastic information to have. You've really provided a lot of great insight, both as things that we can do sitting on, the side of the table where you're in the hot seat, so to speak, being interviewed, and also if you're interviewing potential employees. Oh, I do see one more. Um, Fabian would like to know, are there things that you should not say during an interview? Or are there any taboo words or phrases or topics? Any guidance on that before we wrap?
No matter how, just a general rule of thumb, no matter how well you get along with this person, remember it's a professional interaction, right? They're not your best friend, they're not your therapist, they're not your family. So obviously, no word that could remotely even be considered like a bad word that you wouldn't want like to teach to a 2-year-old kid, right? Or if they said that in school, their teacher would be like, your kid says XYZ. So nothing that would be a bad word. It is a professional setting, so politics is not a good thing to talk about during that setting. Just be professional, right? Like be crisp, friendly, warm, kind, but be professional. I think a lot of this is common sense. Most of us have it. So that's how I'd approach it.
Again, fantastic advice. Well, we do want to be respectful of everyone's time. We know you're also very busy. Asa, thank you so very much. We have recorded this session and we will send it out to all of you so you can watch it again and again if you'd like. As I said, a lot of great information provided in here. If you would like to follow up with LinkedIn, LinkedIn request to Asta, please feel free to do so. If there are other topics that you'd like us to talk about in an upcoming webinar, please reach out to us. sphalumni@emory.edu is our general inbox. And we're happy to hear from you at any time. Asta, thank you, thank you, thank you once again. You are a gem. And we'll talk to you all next time. Have a great weekend.
Bye. Thank you guys. Good luck.